Right. Steve Aitken is the founder of the Intelligent Plant. He will present to us the data platforms or platforms for use with data, bottom up or top down. Steve runs Intelligent Plant Limited, a disruptive technology based out of Aberdeen. He has worked in the oil and gas industry all this century. He has worked with performance improvements, PIA, Marticon, and has created Intelligent Plant in 2006. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks very much for the intro. So yeah, I'm the founder of Intelligent Plant. I'm going to try and do some Menti sort of surveys throughout this presentation to see what people are thinking. If you can see, there's a go to www.menti.com and type in this code. If you've got a phone or something like that, that's a good thing to do it on, because then you can have the screen in front of you and answer questions on your phone. A bit like if you've done one of those quizzes in COVID with your family. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that, and during that I'll have a chat about myself and the company. So my name's Steve Aitken. My background is I was originally did physics at university and switched to do computing science. From there, I left, worked with a company called PI that was an engineering consultancy, and effectively helped them build tools to help their engineers and help others do things. From there, I left and set up Intelligent Plant. So Intelligent Plant is all about making things easy for people. We have a number of tenets that are honesty, integrity, simplicity, and it's really about being open, honest, and being simple about things. So this is my presentation is going to be very high level, like really high level. It's about how we think, not what we're thinking, and how we do things, not what we're doing. And it's really something that's that I think about quite a lot, because sometimes you can have the same situation, and if you look at it from a different perspective, suddenly things seem easier. So that's what we're going to try and open up in this presentation. I can see some people coming in on the Menti already, which is great, and I'll show that as we get to it. So one of the things I often think about is scaling, and this is relevant when we're looking at data platforms or platforms with data. And I often think about, how do we do things so that they can scale? How do we do something so that it really does a lot, rather than something that only solves a small problem? And really, in my mind, that's about solving one problem for many, and that could be many companies or many departments or many people, but not for solving many problems for one. So this isn't, if you want to scale, you're not solving every problem that your manager has, but you are solving a problem that everyone has. And that's what I often think about and challenge myself with when I'm doing something. Am I solving one problem for many people, or am I solving many problems for one person? So when we start on this sort of journey, usually there's an interesting discussion that people have, and it'll be quite confused. There will be someone that will be saying, hey, we need to cleanse the data first before we can do anything. Somebody else will be saying, hey, we need to choose a platform. And another one will be saying, hey, never mind that, until we've got everything organized, it wouldn't be any difference anyway. We need to organize everything, then it'll be easy. And someone else will have a problem. They'll be saying, I need to reduce emissions, and I don't understand what any of you guys are talking about. So that's an example problem, and really lots of the different views that you may have coming in. So if you've not done it already, pull up Menti on your phone. With these things, there's no right or wrong answer. It's really just about capturing opinions, because this is really an opinion piece. After answering, keep the page open on your device. There are more questions, but we'll get to these questions at the right time. So when we're talking about this, we're going to talk about two different approaches. One is bottom up, starting with the data, and the other one is top down, starting with the business problem. Actually, before I go on to that, I'll show you what it looks like, because I can see this and no one else can just now. And so I'll pull this up, and you should see now the graph of what people are thinking. So in terms of how would people approach data problem platforms, it appears to be mostly a bit of both, a bit of top down and some bottom up. So that's what people are thinking just now. And this will update as people add more. So just find Zoom again. So how do we tend to approach bottom-up delivery? First of all, we think about storing all the data in one place. And that's hey, we want a data lake. We want an engineering data warehouse. We want somewhere that we've got all the data in one place. That's often the first problem in what I would call a bottom-up delivery. The next problem we would think about is modeling the data. So now we've got it all in one place. We need to describe it. We need to understand it. We need to make it approachable for people and/or problems. Once we've done that, we'll often say, well, we need APIs to be able to access this data. We need to be able to interact with these models, to do things with them, to understand them and make use of them. And then once we've got all of those things in place, we would say, well, now we need to solve a problem. What is the problem we're going to solve, and how is it going to make use of those APIs and those models and the data that we've got? Now, when we start doing this, each of these stages, so we've gone back to the first stage, each of these stages has a number of things that will affect how we approach it. So for instance, storing all the data in one place, it's going to take a number of different things. There'll be an amount of duration or effort. There'll be a certain amount of expertise that's required to do that correctly. And there's probably going to be some licensing or subscriptions for either for cloud platforms or for data platforms. And there may actually be some other things we need to take into account, like contractual or country restrictions for data as to where it's stored, and can we do it in one place? Do we need one place per country? Do we need one place per client, for example? Now, I'm not going to go through every one of the steps in this in terms of store all the data and so on, but you get the idea. Each of these steps has an amount of duration, an amount of expertise required, possibly some licensing and subscriptions, and then you've got to start thinking about all the legal stuff to make sure that you're doing something that's okay. So with that, when you're doing that, you're kind of doing one thing. So you're storing the data in one place. That's one thing. You're creating all the models, you're exposing all the data, and then you're building tools that use the data to solve a problem. It's kind of, you do those things once to move to the top. So with that, I think we'll move the Menti to the next question. And in this question, we're going to speak about what do we think is the most difficult step in bottom-up delivery. So I'm going to display that now so we can see that live. So it's whether it's build the tools. I believe you get to sort them. So you pick the first one, and pick the second one, pick the third one, and so on and so on. So it's quite interesting. As I said at the beginning, there is no right answer to this or no wrong answer. Everything's really what the perspective is, because these are quite high level concepts. I think with that, we can say that it appears that create models that describe all the data is seen to be one of the most difficult steps. Next being store all the data in one place. And then building tools that use the data to solve problems, third, and the APIs is seen to be something that's quite doable. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. Certainly, I've seen a lot of struggles with creating models that describe all the data well, because you can create a model, but it might not be the right model, and you might have to do it again. So I think that shows a well-educated audience. Coming back to the PowerPoint then. So the general message with bottom up is there's clear task ownership. You kind of know what you're doing and what you're doing next. And it's quite a wide problem space. All of the data, all of the models, you know, there are so much to do there. It's great for big teams, I think is the right way to put it. Because there's so much to do that you can actually assign things to different people and start going on and going with that. Bottom up tends to solve data problems. Oh, by the way, feel free to put in questions in the questions tab in here at any point in the presentation. We'll pick them up at the end. But delay the resolution of business problems until the last step, because until you've got the data stored and you've got the models and you've got the APIs, and until you've got those things in place, there's nothing really to access it. And that's assuming that you're strictly doing bottom up, and that's possibly the point. So what about top-down delivery? And there are multiple ways to do this, but this is one that I'm going to discuss. So usually with top-down delivery, it's kind of a business exercise as opposed to an IT exercise. And they're likely to say, what's the high-value problem we're going after? And they'll weigh them up by risk and reward. And then they'll leap into building tools that use the data that they have and build their own models to solve the problem. So not general models that are for use by everything, but something that's for use just for this problem. And then they'll have to expose APIs to allow the data for this problem to be seen. Not in a general way, not in a way for everything to be able to see it, but just for this case, for this, this problem. And then they're likely to connect to existing data that's there throughout the organization. So this is like the opposite way around. It's centralizing around the problem rather than centralizing around the data. And flipping it back to the how many times do you have to do this, you're probably going to prioritize what the high value cases are once, and then for every problem, you're going to have to build a tool that solves the problem, expose the APIs, and connect the existing data required throughout the organization. So with that, we'll go back to the Menti and we'll see what people think are the most difficult steps or the order of difficulty for the top-down approach. So I'll just go and share Menti now. Of course, this is quite subjective because I guess the question would be, are we talking about one thing or are we talking about all of them? It looks like things are still flipping about, so we'll leave it a little while until that settles down. And I think that's about there. So it looks like connect to the existing data required throughout the organization is likely one of the most difficult steps, which is the last one in this case. And that building tools to use the data is the second most difficult. And then third, being prioritizing the high value use cases. I find that quite surprising. I think I would have put that as being the easiest and one that was probably done in a couple of meetings. But I guess to do it correctly is to do it really well, you could see that being quite hard. And then expose APIs again is seen as quite easy. So that's really interesting. So we'll come back to PowerPoint. So the general message I have with top-down, it's a thin problem space. It's quick to deliver individual solutions, but can create challenges with integration. So you might solve one problem and then someone solves another problem, and having something that's able to use both of them together can be a bit challenging because there was nothing that integrated the two. So top-down prioritizes business problems, but may leave general data problems completely untouched. And now that we've been through those views on top-down and bottom-up, we're going to ask the original question again to see if we've got the same perspective in terms of should we start with bottom-up, should we start with top-down, or should we do a bit of both? I think a bit of both is a clear winner here. I will share the final results afterwards as well. I think I'm going to give them back to SPDM for distribution. But I think that's quite a good answer. So if you found that interesting or think that you'd like to get in touch, my name's Steve Aitken. I'm on LinkedIn. Search for Steve Aitken and you'll find me, or if you really want to type in a URL, that's the URL for me there. And Intelligent Plant's the company I run. That's the link to our company. Again, if you type Intelligent Plant, you'll be able to find us, or you'll probably be able to find it by searching for me. With that, we'll go on to questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Steve. That was very interesting, and thanks for the audience participation. It makes it somewhat involving for us all. We have a few questions here. Firstly, one from Satki Norton. Bottom up can put you in a good place to progress and eventually solve a lot of business problems long term. But how do you demonstrate that and justify the time resource needed to get there?
Yeah, I think you're describing the sort of the challenge that I'm talking around, and that's the loaded question of, is it bottom up, is it top down, or is it a bit of both? Because people tend to focus on one or the other naturally. I think naturally I focus on top down, but I have to challenge myself repeatedly and go, wait a minute, sometimes you've got to solve one data problem for everyone as well as one business problem for everyone. So I think by aligning with a business problem that is being solved and illustrating how you've made that easier to solve, you help justify that. So it's not about a purist one way or the other. It's about saying, hey, we were able to solve this business problem and we were able to do it a lot faster because, hey, we've done this data stuff. And I think that kind of came out in another thing around, once you've made one step with the data, if you do that in a general way, there are probably some things you would never be able to do from the business perspective because that data wouldn't exist and you wouldn't know how to do it.
So you basically need a good understanding at the beginning of the top end problem and what the data landscape looks like before you start looking at mapping the movement of data to the problem, as it were.
I'd almost say it's a bit like having two teams, like a development team and a sales team. And you've got, the sales team that's done one problem and the development team that's kind of building stuff up. Something invisible. Yeah, on you go.
At both ends, you can't be blind to the other end. Okay, another question from Holland here. Over time, you would expect top down and bottom up to converge on the same ultimate solution. Is the question here more about how quickly and how much value is created along the way?
Brilliant question. Feels like an answer. I think yes. I mean, eventually the two meet, and at that point you've solved everything. That might be a long way in the future, and we might never get there. But everything gets closer and closer and closer as we get better at this. So I completely agree.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, another one. Is bottom-up versus top-down analogous to the waterfall versus agile approach taken in the IT community? Both have their place, but depend on levels of risk and how clear or messy the problem to be solved is.
Wow.
How do you see that?
Interestingly, when you said the first part, I was thinking something different, and but so I'm going to answer the first part and then ask you to repeat the second part of the question because I've forgotten it by then.
All right.
Yep. Yeah. So what I thought you were going to say was around waterfall and agile is easier applied to multiple business problems, and waterfall would be easier applied to the bottom up model. But you actually asked something else and compared something. So what was the second part of that question?
Yeah, but both have their place, but depend on levels of risk and how clear or messy is the problem to be solved. Is that how you see it here too?
That is also true. In that space, it's almost the other way around, because once you've defined a problem in the problem first space, you kind of know what you're going to do, and you've got a defined thing to go and do, and it's got an outcome. It's got a value to it. So I completely agree. But interestingly, the agile project is most likely on the top down, and the waterfall project is most likely on the bottom up. So the risk is the opposite type of risk. That is really, really interesting.
So waterfall against gravity, great. I have another question. Do you think starting with the domain experts, a conceptual mental model about how things work can be better than either top down or bottom up?
I think the more different disciplines speak, the quicker we get to that point of meeting between the two. And I think that's answering the question in terms of, yes, we need domain experts. We also need data experts. We need people that are experts in every field to come together and discuss their problems. And only by fully understanding those aspects, because to one person, the thing that appears to be an easy problem is incredibly hard. And to another, that's really easy. So getting that and getting that shaped so you can go, well, actually, you should do this part of what I need about. It is where you get a really good answer from it.
Okay, have one more. Is it easier to get management buy-in and funding for top-down? Do you think this drives the approach, even though a bottom-up approach may solve many problems at the same time?
I do think that's the case. I think it's also, so we're a company, it's easier to sell top-down solutions than to sell a bottom-up solution. And that is for the same reason. You can define the value. That being said, it doesn't mean that needs to drive everything. For instance, with a couple of top-down deliveries, you've probably, if you've done it, or when you do it, let's put it that way, when you do it, you can consider the bottom-up stuff that you want to roll in and actually go, right, we're going to solve this problem and we're going to move this forward this way. We're going to solve this problem and we're going to move it forward this way. So that combined approach, I think, is the key, because then you've got the business buy-in on you've solved the problem, and you've managed to move everyone forward in a way that makes it easier to solve the next one.
All right. Again, you have to have vision of both ends of the problem, as it were. Okay. At the moment, we have no more questions, but everybody, I'm sure people are still thinking about the issue, and feel free to go on Slack afterwards and continue the dialogue, etc. I think we're just about to come to the end of our session this morning. So, Steve, thanks very much, and Michael as well for your paper as well. Don't forget, we've got the afternoon session starting at 3, and hopefully we'll see you all there shortly. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant lunchtime. Thank you much.